Good morning. I'm Judy Butler, and I'm going to tell you about my own Minutemen. In honor of the 4th of July, I would like to introduce you to my two Minutemen. They are my great, 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 great grandfather, Jonathan Bancroft, and his brother Ebenezer Bancroft. The Bancrofts, my mother's family, came to Massachusetts from England in 1630. But on to Jonathan and Ebenezer. Jonathan was born in 1750, making him approximately 27 years old at the beginning of the Revolutionary War. He took part in the Battle of Bennington. He was eventually commissioned a first lieutenant of the 7th Middlesex County Regiment. I was always intrigued by his old musket that held place of honor over the fireplace in the house built by him in 1787 and where I would spend part of the summer every year as a kid. He had carried it during the Revolutionary War. There's another musket in the family that has been identified as British and said to have been taken at the Battle of Bennington. Both muskets are still in the family. A Bancroft cousin, another Jonathan, has told me that he has great grandfather's commission letter signed by John Hancock. After the war, Jonathan was a prominent member of the Unitarian Church and for many years was a deacon. Now, I have to wonder if I get special credit for having that much Unitarian blood flowing in my system. Now, let's talk about great, 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 great Uncle Ebenezer, who is known as the last man off Bunker Hill. In 1754, when he was but 16 years old, he joined a company of soldiers en route for Canada. He took part in the French and Indian War, where in 1757 he was commissioned an ensign and was present at the siege and capture of Quebec. He had sworn an oath of allegiance to the king during his provincial army days and took it very seriously. However, he hastened to Lexington when he heard the news of the opening shots in the Revolutionary War. He saw dead Americans lying on the field and said, "In my mind, this fully absolved me from my oath." Then came 1775, when he marched to Cambridge to join the patriotic forces assembled there. He was commissioned a captain in Colonel Bridges' regiment. He commanded a company of 58 officers and men at Bunker Hill and was eventually promoted to lieutenant colonel of the 7th Regiment. However, it turns out there's more to Ebenezer's story. The historian and author Nathaniel Philbrick, in his book Bunker Hill, has devoted 2 pages to Ebenezer's efforts in getting cannon moved and usable on the hill and his escape off the hill that made him the last man off Bunker Hill. However, I have found Ebenezer's own words about the battle more interesting, and I quote from his recollections as told to and written down by his grandson. And I quote Ebenezer: "As I was loading my gun the last time and just withdrawing the ramrod, an officer sprang over the breastwork in front of me and presented his piece. I threw away the rammer which was in my hand and instantly placed the muzzle of my gun against his right shoulder, a little below the collarbone, and fired, and he fell into the trench. This was my 22nd fire that day. I had then a severe struggle to escape out of the fort, the gateway of which was completely filled with British soldiers. I held my gun broadside before my face and rushed upon them, and at first bore some of them down, but I soon lost my gun, a remarkably long one, which I had taken from the French at Chambly in the old French War. I leaped upon the heads of the throng in the gateway and fortunately struck my breast upon the head of a soldier who settled down under me so that I came with my feet to the ground. Directly as I came to the ground, a blow was aimed at me with the butt of a gun, which missed my head but gave me a severe contusion on the right shoulder. Numbers were trying to seize me by the arms, but I broke from them, and with my elbows and knees cleared the way, so that at length I got through the fort. The last man I passed stood alone, and the thought struck me that he might kill me after I had passed him. So as I ran by him, I struck him a blow across the throat with the side of my hand. I saw his mouth open, and I have not seen him since. A shower of shot was falling all around me as I ran down the hill. One struck my hat, several marked my clothes, one struck me in the left hand and severed off that forefinger. Our men were all in advance of me, and I was almost, if not entirely, alone from the time I left the fort till I came to Charlestown, on which there was not a man to be seen. When the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776, Uncle Ebenezer planted an elm tree and fired 13 rounds from his rifle. He fired the rounds every July 4th for the rest of his life, adding one for each new state. That tree was still alive 100 years later. Now, both Jonathan and Ebenezer are buried in the old Bancroft family cemetery, which was once a quiet, reflective place with many interesting headstones. Sad to say, it now sits right up against the main highway from Boston to New Hampshire. Plus, a few years ago, a large shopping mall was erected and totally encompasses the cemetery. It now seems like an ignominious place for those men to spend eternity. So, this is my own Yankee Doodle Dandy 4th of July patriotic story. And we will now have Anita light up our lives with a talk on fireworks. Anita, over to you.
Thank you, Judy. One of my favorite inventions are fireworks. I grew up in Schaffhausen, Switzerland, a Renaissance town along the Rhine, and with a fort. My first firework experience was when we were kids. We gathered behind the fort with paper lanterns, waiting for the firework spectacle. Later on, we moved closer to the Rhine Falls, the biggest falls in Europe. There on August 1st, which is the Swiss Independence Day, we enjoyed fireworks above the falls, in the sky, and above the water. During a stay on Lipari, which is an island north of Sicily, we watched fireworks right on the beach, not knowing it would remind me of war. So strong was the detonation. In 1980, I lived on Mackinac Island in Michigan, and on my first 4th of July celebration, beautiful fireworks unfolded over the island, and I wasn't on the beach. I used to live in Japan, but never saw fireworks. I know from photographs the Japanese are experts in this domain. The word in Japanese for fireworks is hanabi. Hana means flower, and bi means beauty, according to my Japanese dictionary. Therefore, the word translates to flower beauty. Japanese people don't celebrate a special occasion with fireworks. They are regarded as fleeting beauty and enjoyed with friends and family while they eat and drink. This is a happy birthday toward for the 4th of July. Happy birthday. Thank you.
Wayne Atto will now share his tale of a 4th of July wedding. Wayne?
Hi, everybody. Let me introduce my very good friends. On my left, Joaquin Galliano and Dan Spencer from Palm Springs. You'll learn more about them as I go along. 13 years ago on this date, we had a double wedding at our house on Red Mountain, north of Cambria. This was during the brief opportunity for same-sex marriage in California. Here, Wayne and Peter were joined first. Reverend Kurt Miner of the UCC Church in San Luis Obispo officiated, and we're shown doing something with our rings. I don't know what. Next image, yes, Dan on the left and Joaquin, their ceremony followed. Guests were my sister Carol Jean, who's with us today this morning, and her partner Jean, Reverend Kurt's wife Linda, and John and Laura Knutson, whom I met through the vocal jazz program at Cuesta College. Incidentally, they had been married up at our house 4 years earlier. The next image is of Laura and Dan and John trying to figure out something about a camera in the kitchen. And here, Dan and Joaquin are making their entrance. Little bit of theater, I would say. And the next, Reverend Kurt on the left, and me and Peter in the dining room after the ceremony. The two couples are shown here after the ceremony with a distracted dog on the right. His name was Chaz. And here on the far left, we have the dog Echo, and Wayne and Peter, who are all wet.
A baptism.
And the wedding supper included champagne, which was served out here on the deck, the pool side. The wedding supper included champagne, lamb chops trimmed by the butcher at Soto's Market, potato salad, curried chicken salad, and for dessert, summer pudding that Peter had made. That evening, we watched the fireworks down on the beach from here at our home. We visit, Dan and Joaquin come to visit us here in Cambria quite regularly, and Peter and I go to Palm Springs to visit them. And dog Chaz is over there on the left. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. What a great way to celebrate 4th of July. When the worship committee first started discussing the 4th of July celebration, I got all excited about the historical and cultural significance of the holiday. Next to Thanksgiving, it's my favorite holiday. When I was growing up, someone in my family started the rumor that we were directly related to Thomas Paine. I have since learned that Tom Paine had no children that survived past infancy, so if we were related, it had to be remotely. I do, however, really have a Grandpa Paine. Do we have a picture of my Grandpa Paine? I thought we did. It's, okay, never mind. I want to believe that my roots hail back to the great man, Tom Paine, the writer of Common Sense, the rabble-rouser who inspired people to embrace the rights of man. I want to believe that my heritage is that of a people who demanded a more perfect union. I derive that heritage, or at least the imagining of it, from my mother's side. My father's was a completely different story. He came to the United States at 6 months old from Sicily, grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, joined the Army in the prequel to World War II, and fought at Normandy, Ardennes, and the Rhineland. That's why I consider myself the quintessential American citizen, first generation on one side and probably seventh or eighth or more on the other. And what could be more American? One of the most memorable remembrances I have of the 4th of July was in 1976, our country's 200th anniversary. I was in England with my family. We wanted to celebrate and saw that the Crystal Palace was having an American celebration with fireworks, symphonic concert, and bagpipes. What says America more? We took the train from London to the borough of Bromley. The concert featured stirring marches, patriotic American music, and the William Tell Overture, complete with live cannon. But when the bagpipes appeared over the horizon, playing what might have been America the Beautiful, my heart literally caught in my throat. It was followed by a massive display of fireworks, and I marveled at the fact that the people from whom we had declared independence were feting us so. I've forgotten the details, but I've never forgotten the emotion. On the train back to London, we were part of a small contingency of Yanks singing "I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy" at the top of our lungs. The Brits responded with "God Save the Queen." It was a blast, an unforgettable blast. There's a but, a big but. What are we celebrating this year? How can we define what the 4th of July means today? Is it a celebration of the democratic experiment? As Ben Franklin said, if we can keep it. I'm fearful. I don't know if we can. We are at the point where we recalibrate so rapidly, we might lose track of our essence. How do we define that essence in terms both meaningful and comprehensible? Am I proud to be an American? Oh yes, I am proud. But more deeply, I'm humbled to be an American. We're going to hear from Chris Fox now. She has a testimonial from her hometown of Sheboygan. I love that name. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Jan. This is a piece of writing called the Sheboygan Chronicles Part 2. When I was growing up, summer did not really begin until the 4th of July. In Wisconsin, we were in school until mid-June, and it wasn't even hot enough then to call it summer. But by July, things were heating up. Anticipation was high. We were going to indulge in the fullness of our too short warm season to cram as much freedom as possible into summer. We took on summer with intensity. We lived 8 short blocks from the beach on the sandy shores of Lake Michigan, where the water seldom got over 56 degrees in the summer. I can say for sure what we did not lack was courage. We were undeterred in our pursuit of fun. The best time to be in the lake, numb from the neck down, was about 2 in the afternoon when the big swells started to come in, and we would shoot down the slide and into the water just as the waves hit. The 4th of July parade, a big thing in my town, never held any surprises. Same high school bands, same Cub Scout and Brownie troops, same playgrounds represented by their crepe paper adorned floats, followed by a flotilla of kids on bikes with streamers drifting behind them. We waited for it and wanted it as if we had not seen it our whole lives. As kids, I think we thought less about patriotism of the 4th, although flags hung from every lamppost in the city. We took our patriotism for granted. That would change later when the protests against the war upended any innocent ideas we had about war and how that equated to freedom and liberty for all. The unrest during the 60s changed forever our naive complacency. We knew kids who had lost fathers, brothers, neighbors in Vietnam. We knew changes were happening and were conflicted about the support for the war juxtaposed by the suffering we read about and saw in the news, the suffering we observed in our community. The 4th of July was never really the same as the war wound down. It felt like a wound that would never allow the suffering and the division in our community to heal, or heal the fear that we felt for our brothers and our friends. So present was it in our lives. Our innocence was gone, and what replaced it was a far less secure vision of the world. It has always surprised me how the pageantry and customs go on, the parades, the fireworks, the patriotic band music, as if enormous changes have not occurred. As teenagers, we wanted to cling to what we knew in the hope that we could return to the same sense of ourselves and our community as we had in a less complicated time. I found that I never really could. Patriotism, as I understood it, was not something I could clearly understand in light of my experience, nor something that I take for granted that I feel. Love of country means coming to terms with the loss of life in war and the continuing wounds of war of those who survive it. War is a fact, but love is a choice. I choose to love the country in which I live, just as I must accept the losses that come with it. And so I write this addendum in memory of Timothy Fox, ex-Marine, ex-Army, jungle expert in the Vietnam War, who gave his life in more ways than one for his country. Rest in peace, Uncle Tim.
Diane, you're next, Diane DeMarco.
Thank you, Andy. I had an awakening at age 18 when then President Nixon sent the National Guard to Kent State, where 5 students were gunned down. I was stunned, horrified, and shocked. Nixon was drafting young male Americans to fight foreign wars, kill civilians in foreign countries, experiment with chemicals like Agent Orange on innocent people. And he called out the Guard to kill innocent American students on campus for demonstrating. I separated emotionally from the US of A on that day. For the first time, I felt uncomfortable saying the Pledge of Allegiance. When traveling abroad for the summer a year later, I learned that most Europeans wouldn't pick up hitchhikers if the traveler was believed to be American. That was due to the US invading Vietnam. I was totally sympathetic to the Europeans who judged America. Turned out, if you were Canadian, the cars would stop to give the hitchhiker a ride. And how did they know if you were an American or Canadian? By the backpack you were carrying. From then on, while in Europe, I carried a backpack with the Canadian flag displayed, and I got rides everywhere. That separation from my country lasted 20 years. But in 1991, I took a trip with my son, Brian, to Washington, D.C., and something surprising happened to me. I became captivated with new understandings of how our country was conceived, how our founding fathers came together to create a democracy after they initiated and won, against all odds, the Revolutionary War against England. How they framed our living Constitution. It was a one-of-a-kind government, which proved to be resilient throughout depression, war, and civil unrest. Wasn't perfect, far from it. Nevertheless, my heart opened to a new understanding about America, the home of my birth. I was proud of our roots, and the brilliant men who envisioned a nation with unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuits of happiness. Took 25 more years for yet another shift in perspective. Trump supporters were flaunting the flag alongside Trump slogans on car bumpers and on Twitter. Members of the far-right Proud Boys staged antagonistic rallies where they would wave American flags. Trump acted out his own embrace of the flag, and when he finished a speech at the CPAC convention, he famously strutted up to the flag on stage, hugged it, kissed it, and mouthed, "I love you, baby." My relationship with America and what our flag stood for was being usurped by a group that I could not relate with or understand. Trump supporters were using that very same flag to represent something that felt racist, not inclusive to all Americans. Days later, I stood on the corner, the local corner, of Cambria Road and Main Street, with signs that said, "Justice for all. Murder is not an accident. My grandson's life matters." I also watched as large pickup trucks drove by with huge black flags waving alongside overly large American flags. It was then that it occurred to me, I had let my flag go. Yes, I allowed others to define what the flag meant, and it was time to own the American flag for myself. I lost it once. I wouldn't lose it again. I wouldn't lose it again. I immediately bought 25 American flags and handed them out to everyone who was standing on the corner with me that day. I told them, each person, that it was time to own our flag once again, and they each took a flag to display, along with "Justice for All" signs. And on my own property, I had a sign that said, "Black Lives Matter," and I surrounded it with American flags. You know, take back the night? I took back the flag. This July 4th, I will remember that my country has further to go in order to right the wrongs it has inflicted on so many people of color, on women and foreigners. But I also know that we are a work in progress, that we have a solid foundation, and that I will speak up to let freedom ring for all our people. When the fireworks are bursting in the dark sky tonight across our nation, I will be grateful to be a US citizen and celebrate the opportunity to continue and make better the United States of America. Thank you.